Welcome to the Spirited Conversation podcast, Straight Talk, served neat. Join us to hear from business leaders, entrepreneurs, and industry insiders as they discuss their stories and insights for success. Now, share a spirit and make a toast as you immerse yourself in the conversation. Here's your host and Chief Libation Officer, Tony Deblauwe.
All right, hello everybody. My name is Tony Deblauwe, Chief Libation Officer of Spirited Conversation. And today I'm joined by Joel Paglione, who is a serial entrepreneur, product developer, and owner of the Oak Bottle. We're going to learn a lot more about his background and really a true entrepreneurial success story. We're going to hear so much about how he's navigated from his college days and early career into this burgeoning empire of consumer products that is really taking a huge range of different areas, including his latest project that he's looking at called LevitatingCup. So Joel, welcome to Spirit Conversation.
Hey Tony, thanks for having me.
So Joel, looking at your background, a lot of things started to jump out at me that I wanted to dive into right away to come up with your ideas and to drive them actually into business. It'd be very interesting to hear how it all formulates for you.
Sure. Yeah, it's maybe I'll start off by going through a little bit of my background, some of the boring stuff, and then go into my career. And then it'll bring me to a point where I can start speaking about some of the products that I've invented, and then maybe a little bit about what I've learned along the journey. So let me start off by going through my background. I was born in Canada, in Windsor, Ontario. Actually, born in Hamilton. I grew up at Windsor, in South Detroit, very close to the States. So a lot of my influence, a lot of my cultural influence was American. All of our radio stations are, for the most part, broadcasted out of Detroit. A lot of the TV stations were broadcasted out of Detroit, and that's where we did our shopping a lot of the times, and a lot of our dinners and a lot of my friends grew up in Detroit. So I had a very American upbringing, even though I was born in Canada. So I went to the University of Windsor, graduated with a Bachelor's of Industrial Engineering, and then I did a minor in business, which really gave me the first kind of introduction into entrepreneurship. So once I finished my industrial engineering degree with my business minor, I went directly, actually let me take a step back. I pursued, after first year, it was, for me, I was losing interest in engineering. I was starting to fall behind. I felt like, what am I doing this? Why am I beating myself up, basically, studying nonstop? And then I decided I would take a co-op position. Someone convinced me to apply, and I actually did a co-op for a position with a company called Navistar. It was originally called International Truck and Engine Corporation, who had basically taken a grant from the U.S. and Canada government to put up a research facility in our area. And so I was chosen to be one of the 7 students, 5 master level and 2 bachelor. And I actually took a voluntary withdrawal from engineering after first year to pursue an 18-month internship with that company. And that R&D facility was located in Windsor, but it required a lot of travel to the States. So I got a lot of influence in American culture. I was only 19, and I was living in Ohio in hotels and going to the product development facility that we had in Ohio at that time. And we were developing trucks, big trucks, commercial trucks. We were trying to solve the emissions issues with trucks and make them lighter weight, have a lesser, basically, environmental footprint in terms of emissions, and make them more aerodynamic and cost-effective. So I really, at a young age, it gave me the foundation into product development. And then after I finished my internship, I went on to complete my MBA. And right after that, I was introduced to the defense division of Navistar. And they actually recruited me into Chicago, into their world headquarters, to work for the product development operations of military programs for that division of Navistar. And at that time, the war was going on in Afghanistan and Iraq. And the story goes, one of the presidents of Navistar was on a plane, and he happened to sit beside the owner of a company who was developing Brinks trucks called Griffin Armor, and that was Greg McKay. And they had a conversation on this plane, and they said, hey, I work for Navistar. I'm the president of Navistar. We developed your chassis, and this guy who is developing these Brinks trucks, he's buying these chassis, and he's up-armoring them. They said, why don't we combine forces? Why don't we create a defense division for Navistar? And so that allowed them to create an armored vehicle on a moving assembly line, which had never been done before. That allowed us to produce armored vehicles at a speed that was basically never done. So they ended up developing an armored vehicle called the MRAP, and they submitted it for the first time ever to a bid for the U.S. Army. And they won the most survivable vehicle of that competition. They built this MRAP so that it could not be destroyed by an IED by utilizing a V-shaped hull instead of a flat bottom underneath the vehicle, which would deflect the impact of an IED. So essentially, this vehicle ended up spinning up this whole defense division of Navistar. I was recruited to that division, and we were developing armored vehicles for very important military programs. It was an urgent operational requirement at that time. People overseas, these brave warfighters and soldiers were being hit by IEDs nonstop, RPGs, underground mines, and we were losing the war. So when we got the contract for 9,000 of our MRAPs at almost $1 million a piece, we had to spin up this company fairly quickly. It was about a 200-person team, and we were developing vehicles extremely quickly. Now, that's where I developed, the reason I'm telling you this is I developed my speed-to-market skills. That's where you really learn how important time is in product development. We were developing vehicles that we didn't know what the requirements were until 19 days prior. I mean, we would get calls and conference calls from people in the military, not only U.S. military, but our allies, that were saying, there's a new threat. We need a vehicle that can protect us. And every day that goes by is our soldiers' lives, and that will mean that you're going to roll up your sleeves and you're going to get that vehicle to market extremely quickly. I started to think about doing my own thing, starting to develop my own products that I was passionate about. And there's a story that I tell a lot, is that I was sitting at dinner and my friend, Nico, was having dinner with me, and his phone kept ringing. And I said, Nico, you can answer your phone, it's not a problem. I don't find that to be rude at all. He said, no. Every time the phone rings, I make $5. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, I developed a stylus. At that time, the iPad case had a magnet in it, and this stylus that he had developed that you can write on the iPad had a magnet in it. And so he had developed this. He'd done a crowdfunding campaign, and he was making money hand over fist. And it's, that dinner, that phone must have rang 400 times. So he had paid for my dinner, he had paid for his dinner, and he probably could have paid for the entire restaurant's dinner, honestly. And I said, Nico, I need to do what you're doing. I need to get into, I have my own ideas. I basically grew up in product development. Can you coach me? And he became my mentor, and extremely bright guy, and we ended up launching my first product, which is the Magnetie, which is had a magnet inside the tail of the and the body of the tie that eliminated the loop on the back of the tie. And the reason I did that is because I was growing up Italian. I always wore big ostentatious neckties, and I loved dressing up. And I always found it was difficult to reach the loop on the back of the tie, and I always thought that was kind of a design flaw of the standard tie. So I removed the loop, we added the magnets, and it allowed the tie to actually be reversible, and it's something I didn't expect. So we ended up developing a two-sided tie, which is two different patterns, and we sold a lot of ties. We were selling to business travelers and people who were traveling overseas, restaurants, as uniforms, things like that. It did very well. And then I ended up developing another product that I was passionate about, which was the oak bottle. The oak bottle is essentially a small, miniaturized barrel that is the world's fastest aging vessel. So it's just the same size as a wine bottle, except that it's American oak. It's charred inside just like a barrel, and it speeds up the aging process for wines, for whiskeys, aging cocktails. You can create your own balsamic vinegar. So it becomes a do-it-yourself home barrel aging product. It's the first time that anyone's ever made a bottle of oak, and it's now known as being the fastest at aging in the comfort of your home and in the palm of your hand. and I can talk a little bit about the background of that perhaps later. But it's done very well. We're very proud of it. I mean, it's been about 2 years. It took us about a half year to develop it, get the kinks out of it, and now it's sold all over the world. We're in stores in the UK. We're in Japan in pop-up shops. We are in most of the restaurants in Dubai and bars in Dubai. We're represented at a lot of the bartending competitions, and world champions are using it to create really unique tasting cocktails and whiskeys. So we're kind of blazing the way in a new category for spirits with that product. And that product brought me to developing the Levitating Cup, which was, as we were seeing our product being used in a lot of the bartending competitions, the creativity aspect of bartending and presentation became something I was also passionate about. So I designed a Levitating Cup, which uses electromagnetic suspension to levitate the cup above a magnetic base for presentation and for wow factor at restaurants or at home. So all of my products kind of end up blending into themselves, and you can see the passion of things that I'm interested in represented in the products that I develop, and there's other things I've got in the development pipeline right now that are a little bit too early to publicly disclose. But this is something I'm really passionate about. When someone introduces me as a serial entrepreneur, I really don't take offense to that. I think that's almost a compliment, because I believe that in product development and anything you do, you should have a lot of irons in the fire. You should have backup plans, and I really do believe that there's a law of large numbers that ends up saying as you put more out there, the probability of success goes up. So why not put as many things out there and see what works and utilize that kind of principle. Wayne Gretzky was interviewed when he was young, and they said, "Why?" As a hockey fan, and I'm a Canadian, so I love hockey. He was interviewed, and they said, "Wayne, how did you become the great one? How did you score so many goals?" He goes, "All I did was shoot on net. The more you shoot on net, the more you score." And I really took that to heart in who I am and what I am doing as a serial entrepreneur and as a product developer.
Well, Joel, that's great. I mean, it's like, I think that passion that's driving, your direction and wanting to, solve problems. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, part of this, can be, hey, this is just kind of a cool, neat thing, but it also, does solve, some issues as well. And I think that's again, a repeating theme in your background. But some of the questions that come to mind, so, when you think about all these different categories, I mean, how do you go about, it's one thing to say, hey, I want to create this thing that does, whatever, but you can spend a lot of that time and stay stuck in the garage and never make it out there. So when you talk about the different categories between the ties, the clothing piece, the cup, this is several different categories going across several different markets. So how, as somebody who may, not have the background specifically in that category, that business category or product category, how do you balance that business side getting into it with the inventing of the product side?
Well, I think that's a great question. I think that a lot of people spend a lot of time almost overthinking it, in my opinion. I believe in jumping into it. I believe in the ready, fire, aim mentality, and I believe in execution. Now, there's to caveat that you wouldn't want to be investing a lot of money in a product before understanding the market, and that absolutely needs to. You have to walk before you run in this type of stuff. You can't jump in and put $100,000 into a product that you're not sure has even a market, and you have to understand the business before you get into it, with tons of money involved. So I believe in baby steps, but at the same time, I've never let the scariness of not being into or not having experience with a certain business or market get in the way of producing and developing a good product. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of great ideas. I'm lucky to have the mindset of a inventor in terms of wanting to solve problems, big or small, whether that be product developing armored vehicles or miniature barrels. I think that one thing that I steer away from that I think can be a trap for a lot of inventors, a lot of entrepreneurs is app development. And although if you look at my background with Salt, we did launch Salt, which is an app and a physical product. Then that's really the only reason I did it. When Nico came to me for Secure Salt, he said, I've got this idea to unlock people's cell phones. When you're near your phone, you shouldn't have a passcode on. Your phone should know you, and you shouldn't have to use your biometrics. You shouldn't have to use your thumbprint. Some Androids don't have that. Can we invent a card that goes in your wallet and it communicates with the phone and lets you know who you are when you're grabbing your phone? I said, that's a great idea. It's got a product and it's got an app. I'll do it. But I learned the hard way, even through that launch. We did very well on Kickstarter. But I learned the hard way that app development is a continual development type of product, where a new operating system comes out, you need to relaunch your app, you need to redevelop your app. A new phone comes out, you have to adapt your app to that phone screen, and there's just so much that goes into the development of that. So I steer away from apps unless you have a full-time app development team, and that's a different story. But steer away from apps, and I steer away from anything that has a lot of electronics and a lot of moving parts. I believe in simple form factor. Creating a product that has a need and is basically a better mousetrap, or it's solving a problem that everyone has. Around some of the failures with that, but I learned the hard way that there's different approaches, and so it's taken me time to understand the approaches to product development depending on what the market is and what the product category is. So for example, with blunt neck clothing, which I developed I was a very big fan of V-neck growing up. Everyone knew me. Everyone called me the Mr. V-neck when I was young. So I developed a cross between a V-neck and a crew neck. Why not create a new neckline? Why does it always have to be a crew neck or a V-neck? And there's a couple different other necklines out there, but none of them has done very well. And so I developed the blunt neck, which is like a blunt-shaped point neckline. It gives it more masculinity in terms of the shirt's design. I think, of course, that's subjective, but for working out, it gives you more airiness, so you can breathe a lot better, and it's just purely, basically, branding without putting a logo on the shirt. So I believe 3-4 years ago that the fashion direction was going to go into a minimalist and a non-branded type of direction, and a very simple, basic wear direction, and it ended up going that direction. Actually, if you look at the current style out there in terms of what you're seeing on Instagram, is just basically white, black, gray shirts, no logos, no design, simple crew necks. So I still think blunt neck is in the incubation period, but the point I'm making there is branding is a whole nother play. It's a whole nother animal. With apparel, a lot of the product development is branding, and that takes a ton of money in terms of marketing. It takes a ton of money in terms of ambassadors and influencer marketing. That I've learned that you got to kind of put those on pause until you have the funding to be able to launch them properly. So I think that, going back to answer your question more directly, I think that there's pitfalls you can avoid with developing products and not going after certain types of products that are typically a drain in terms of continual cash investment in development. And I believe there are certain markets and certain types of products that we should steer away from that are branding type products that require a lot of marketing expense.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny when you talk about the expense and everything else. You now have experience with multiple funding platforms. So what have you learned from that? You've been on Kickstarter, Indiegogo. So how has that part of building your dream and your business been? I mean, has it been useful? Have you looked at these platforms and said, I could do something different, or has it worked for you as expected?
I'm a huge fan of crowdfunding. I do believe in crowdfunding. I think that lately it's become how much are you self-investing into the crowdfunding. I think there's a lot of tricks that people are playing in self-funding and using platforms that will boost your first day funding to get you into the algorithm and get you on the front page of Kickstarter, and then there's that people are looking at it as a marketing expense. So you get a big investor in, he or she will put $2 million into the crowdfunding project and top page, and then see how it rides out, and they'll throw a lot of money at Facebook ads and look at pixels and subdomains and push people to the site where the ads are working and reinvest in those ads. And so it's become a little bit overcalculated. It used to be more organic, but I do believe that crowdfunding is in the long term, whether you're using Indiegogo, Kickstarter, or any of the other platforms, I think that it is a great way to not only get initial funding for production, which is a lot of the barrier to entry these days, especially with homegrown inventors like myself, who don't have a big investment pool or family and friends who are willing to give money to them to produce. So it's a great way to raise money, but at the same time, it's a great way to test your product out. It's like focus group on steroids. You've got random people from around the world who are pledging to your product, giving you feedback real time, and we're going to be your first movers on or first investors and first users on your product. This is a beautiful thing, and you can continue to ask them about the product, how they enjoyed it, and on top of that, it's a great marketing tool. So you get a lot of exposure out there on Facebook with other startup and product development sites, and you have this media that follows the campaigns that are on Kickstarter. So it's a great tool. I think that long term, as the different crowdfunding platforms become a little bit more regulated than they are right now. Like I said, I think there's a lot of hacking going on, and not hacking in the sense that you would imagine. I mean people who are using tricks to get onto the algorithms and get up at the top of the page, as opposed to doing it like the old days where you just go in and you just word of mouth it, and it grows organically.
Right.
So yeah, it's definitely an amazing tool. It's definitely an amazing tool. I definitely recommend it to anyone, but just be cautious of the little things that people that you'd want to steer away from on it.
So Joel, looking at all these different experiences together and all of these products, how would you describe your personal brand? Because all of these products, I think they're under sort of one general umbrella, but when you really have to kind of put a stake in the ground and say, this is who I am, this is my brand, how would you describe that?
That's a great question. I've never been asked that. I think I think the vision of my brand is a product incubation type of company, I guess. Maybe a think tank. Maybe a passion-driven product developer that believes in inventing things that I enjoy, that have been issues in my own life, and as my team grows, maybe we're going to be pursuing products that are issues within other people's lives, that are within our team. And I think that we're going to be. I think that the branding really is that we are a problem-solving product development company. So we are not here to make a ton of money. We're here to solve everyday problems for people. We're going to bring products to market very quickly. We're going to, it's very similar, I think, to, is there an issue? Okay, why didn't someone else think of that? And then why don't we get it out to market quickly? What's stopping us? So I think that the answer is we are developing basically a think tank or a incubation, but not for apps, not for tech. It's mainly, there's really no barriers on anything. It could be. I was just thinking the other day, I bought an espresso machine for my desk. As simple as this. I bought an espresso machine for my desk, and I had to go online to find sugar packets, and then I had to go search for stirring sticks. And I said, why am I buying sugar packets and stirring sticks separately? Why? Just ask yourself why. And then ask yourself why 4 more times until you find out what the root cause is. And then you say, all right, well, there's a solution to that. Why aren't they putting sugar on the stirring stick, and why aren't they creating a spoon that has sugar on it already? And so you have one product to buy. And it's simple as that. Things like that come up every single day as you're going throughout your day. Just simple problem-solving products.
Yeah, and I can see, just how your mind looks at sort of everyday routines, like making coffee and just it turning into an idea. So, given this range, I know you talked about you have certain things that are known but still considered incubation. Is there any one category that you're looking at tackling next? I mean, has there been just this one area like, I don't have the idea yet, but man, this is a category that I've got to figure out something I want to go after? Anything like that in your mind that you really have been?
Yes.
Okay, what's that?
Yeah, my defense background and just seeing what's going on in the world today, I think that when you look at what's happening out there with some of the threats we have in the U.S., not only in the U.S., overseas in Canada, with terrorism and just with crime and with violence in general, I think that there needs to be more emphasis by product developers, designers, inventors, and entrepreneurs to solve the problem at the source, not in terms of policy or regulation or complaining to the local politicians and writing it in newspapers. Why aren't more people trying to solve the problem at its source? Why can't we stop a bullet in its tracks? Why can't we have cameras that are like Tweety Bird from the cartoons, following our every move? Why can't we have lasers that can deflect the direction of a bullet? It can map. We can develop augmented reality glasses that you walk into a room and you can map every single wall, every surface, every floor, every object instantaneously almost right now. We can map a bullet. We can tell its trajectory. It's not curved. You just track it for literally a millisecond. You know exactly where it's going. Why aren't we zapping these bullets out of the direction and have these devices calculate, where these bullets are going and then put them into a trajectory that is safe? Why aren't we spending more money on developing lighter weight bulletproof vests and armor, for people, for everyday people? It's something that doesn't need to be in the way of people, but it becomes a regular apparel. These are things I think that in the long term I want to focus on, are solving the issues that perhaps could make the world safer. These products that I'm developing are just getting me ready for what I expect to be able to do in the future, which is really take a look at an issue and step back from it, ask the 5 whys, figure out what the issue is in its basic form, and then develop a product that can solve that issue. As opposed to complaining, as opposed to regulation, as opposed to these laws and things that really aren't going to solve the issue, we need to get back into inventing, into developing kind of like a Tony Stark mentality around making people safer, making lives, savable.
So, Joel, a question I always ask on Spirit of Conversation: if you could have a drink with anybody, who would it be and why?
I think I would go back to some of my childhood mentors and people that I grew up with, and take a look at who I am now, who I was back then. Allow them to evaluate me, and just kind of give me some tips on what I can do to do better. I think that taking a look at yourself in the mirror is very important. Seeing what path your life is on and what you're into right now, and see if they would suggest any changes. I think besides looking at yourself in the mirror, I think it's always important to go back and have another person who may know you, when you were young, and who may have given you vision and given you some some direction and allow them to reevaluate you. That's very important in any process, is to reevaluate how you are doing, what trajectory you're on, and then adjust and course correct. So I think that would probably be who I would have a drink with, is perhaps a bunch of my mentors. I don't do enough of that. I should probably spend more time going home, back to my roots, and having those types of drinks with those mentors.
Great, Joel. Well, again, thanks for taking the time and joining me on Spirit of Conversation. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Tony. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. For show notes and to get more insights from entrepreneurs and spirit lovers alike, please visit spiritedconversation.biz.